Hi, I'm Ken Heyman, Managing Director of Alliance Bernstein's Advisor Institute. Thanks for taking a few minutes with me this afternoon to explore some of the applications of psychology to the work of the retail financial advisor. And in this case, specifically, the work that you do with your plan sponsors, the individuals who are your primary clients. At the Advisor Institute at Alliance Bernstein, our charter is to take insights from the behavioral sciences, in some cases, raw insights from behavioral finance, more often, general concepts from psychology and neurology, and apply them specifically to the tasks, the experiences, the challenges that you're facing working with human beings in the normal course of doing business. So the idea here is to equip you with unique skills that translate into improving your commercial success in various places. Now, we have programs on how to generate new business, stimulate first conversations, generate referrals, all the kind of stuff that's the stock and trade of the consultative salesperson. But today we're going to talk about something a little bit different and perhaps a little more timely during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that is how to manage a conversation with a plan sponsor, actually with any human being, who is emotionally distressed, who's been activated by some aspect of the economy, their own life, the dynamics of portfolios, perhaps the dynamics of the larger economy. Certainly, there's lots of other things we could talk about one could be activated by. But what the advisor can do specifically to understand what's happening, realize the challenge that you're facing, and then navigate successfully that conversation so that individual gets some relief and so that you can provide the advice that they're actually paying you to provide. So we're really trying to make you more effective in these moments of heightened emotionality. So today we're going to look at this from a very pragmatic point of view. So I'm not going to use any slides. I'm going to kind of use myself as a demonstration subject for you to first give you some insights into how to understand human decision making and what's going on in the brain based on what you're seeing in front of you. And then I'm going to give you a very simple 4-step conversation model, a series of interactions that you can manage. Literally, you'll be able to do this when you leave the seminar this afternoon. A couple of quick notes on this, and you'll be able to execute this very quickly and easily. It's a natural conversational process, but it will result in powerful influence and the ability to reduce emotionality on the part of the other person. First, we have to understand psychology. So, borrowing liberally on the fantastic work of Dr. Daniel Kahneman, who wrote the book Thinking Fast and Slow, and you may be aware of him as Nobel Prize winner in economics, actually the father or perhaps even grandfather of the behavioral finance movement, but truly a pioneering figure in applying insights from psychology, deep experimental insights into how human beings make decisions. And what Kahneman tells us in his book, and is basically in the title of the book, is that the way the brain evolved over tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or millions of years really allowed the brain to split up tasks and allow different parts or structures of the brain to do different tasks depending on what the human creature at that time needed. So we really have to understand the brain as having multiple functioning parts. And as science has explored the brain, we realize that there's actually hundreds and hundreds of separate structures in the brain that are doing different things. What Kahneman was helpful for us to understand is looking at the great big picture, kind of what are the gross organizing principles that operate in the brain and how to apply them to working with human beings. Now, I'm going to do a lot of interpreting of that for you today. That's actually my area of expertise. But the basic thing to understand about the human brain is it's dividing tasks between what Kahneman calls the fast thinking brain and the slow thinking brain. So the first thing we have to do is understand these two things and how they present, because you will be seeing this all the time in virtually any conversation you'll have. And in fact, for the rest of your career, one of the most powerful things you can do to prepare yourself to be effective with humans is to make an assessment right as soon as you're talking with someone, or as quickly as possible, which part of their brain are they using, because that's going to tell you what you need to do to be effective. So let's start from the bottom up and talk about the fast thinking part of the brain. The fast thinking brain can be understood as the part of the brain, the oldest part of the brain, what you could call the chassis or foundation of the brain. It's located back here in the back of the skull. The cerebellum, the amygdala, the brain stem, the connecting linkages between thought and action and the movement of your body. This part of the brain is in control of survival instincts. And so what the bulk of Kahneman's research was to articulate or define and then be able to explain the various automatic mechanisms of thought that are attached to the programming we have inside of us to help us survive in hostile ecologies. See, the human brain hasn't really changed in any measurable way in over 50,000 years. So as we learn more about it, we gain a great deal of power of influence and the ability to understand what's happening with people and what we can do to help them. So this fast-thinking brain is full of these programs called heuristics. Heuristics are kind of automatic mechanisms, quick and dirty protocols that the brain evolved and embraced in order to help us survive. And one of the most powerful heuristics is what we call the fight or flight mechanism. Fight or flight mechanism is the tendency of the body to become very activated when presented with a threat. So this past summer, for example, I had the good fortune of having a wonderful trip out to the Grand Teton National Park, and I spent a day hiking up from the base of the trail up to this place called Death Canyon, of all names, Death Canyon. About halfway up the side of the mountain, came around a corner, and about 75 yards in front of me was a grizzly bear, kind of grazing on this particular yellow flower they like to eat in the spring. Well, the grizzly bear was fully aware that I was there and thought nothing of it, since he was about a 600-pound animal, and I am not, which caused me to have a very profound experience. The fight or flight mechanism inside me activated automatically. So what happened? Well, my heart rate increased because my brain automatically, as soon as it realized I was threatened, squirted a whole bunch of adrenaline into my blood. That proceeded to elevate my heart rate, to oxygenate my blood, to increase the acidity of the blood so it could carry more oxygen to my limbs. My pupils immediately dilated, and I went into a kind of crouch. My muscle tension went up everywhere. I was on high alert, and I started to vigilantly scan to make sure there were no other dangers around me, while keeping a weather eye on my big friend across the field. That's the fight or flight mechanism, the tendency of the body to get activated. And what it does is it profoundly organizes where the blood and the electrical charging systems of the brain locate. They all go into this lower area, and they put the body into the preparation for action. Fight or flight. Either attack it and kill it, or run away. And I can tell you, I had a very, very profound feeling like I wanted to run away from that danger. Now, why is that important to understand? Well, that part of the brain doesn't have any command of language. In fact, none of its functions are higher thought functions. It's all about survival, reaction, emotion, impulsivity, quick decisions. Let's go. We got to get out of here. Take action, take action, take action. Well, there's another part of the brain, part of the brain that you know a little bit more about because you use it a heck of a lot if you're a financial advisor, and that's called the neocortex. It's right here in the front of the brain. I have mine prominently displayed here so you can see what I'm talking about. See, the human being, this neocortex, this large, what we call the new brain, neocortex, is the last part of the brain that developed, and in humans it developed massively compared to other animals. If you were to look at the skull of a chimpanzee or a gorilla or an orangutan or bonobo, you would see this flat plane from the brow ridge back to the crown of the head. It's flat, but in humans, you can see this whole area bulges out to give us more room for this large thinking tool. The neocortex is the tool of thought, logic, mathematics, and importantly, this is the part of the brain, logical, mathematical, rational, deliberate, slow-moving decision-making. It's also the part of the brain that uses language. Now, what I want you to understand at this point, because we're right at the midpoint of my comments here, this is a fairly short little seminar, what I want you to be aware of and hold on in your mind right now are these two things I've just said. One part of the brain is all about putting us into action, impulsivity, no deliberate attention, no deliberate rationale, no logic, no language, just action, 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 action on impulse. The other part of the brain is all about logic and deliberation and slow calculations. That's why Kahneman calls this thinking fast and slow. Two different parts of the brain, two different systems, two different purposes. Well, here's the problem. Our brain evolved to cope with things like grizzly bears and poisonous snakes and lions and tigers, oh my, right? And all sorts of threats that required us to take action. Pick up a rock and throw it, pick up a stick and hit it, run away as fast as you can. All actions, and it acts instantaneously and non-rationally. Well, today in our daily lives, we don't have life-threatening situations most of the time. When our boss comes in and says, hey, that report's late, it's not like he's then going to chop our head off. And so it's not appropriate for us to pick up a rock and hit him as much as we might want to. So what we have is this primitive operating system, this primitive coding, if you will, in the wetware of our brains that still operates in the same way. Fight or flight, take action, get impulsive. Well, I want you to think about this for a minute from a critical perspective. If that's the case, then if a client, your plan sponsor or one of the clients, participants in the plan, has a loss or sees something happening in the news or reads something in their social media or talks to one of their friends who says, oh, I'm up 30% this year and they're only up 10, they're going to have that fear of missing out, the fear that there might be something wrong, as opposed to this other person is either lying or is just very, very lucky. And they're going to have this strong emotional feeling. And what will that feeling do? It'll cause them to want to take action, cause them to want to look around and take some kind of action. We have to get going. We have to move. We have to kill it. We have to hit it. We have to run away. Take action. That's what I want you to realize. So that the human being from time to time is going to come to you, or you're going to show up around them, and they're going to be highly activated with these strong emotions, the desire to take action, the desire to fix it by movement. And so you can think of this lower part of the body as the part of the brain that controls emotion. Emotions are all about putting the body into action. Well, this is a great survival trait if you're dealing with lions and tigers and bears. When it comes to investments, it is the worst part of the brain to use. There is never, and I mean this absolutely never, a time when your emotions provide good guidance for making investment decisions. There certainly may be times when the markets are volatile enough that there's an urgency to act. But using your emotions to design that action, reacting to the marketplace without a plan, taking action impulsively without consideration is a terrible decision, almost always leads to bad outcomes. And we know this, for example, from following the Dalbar study that's been done year after year after year, over 20 years now, that reveals that the average investor with no professional guidance, with no professional help, with no anchoring to an external resource to help them make sure they're not making impulsive decisions, the average investor does terrible compared to the market. And the reason for this is very clear in terms of tracking large numbers of people and their actions. When they're using impulsive, emotional-based decision-making, reacting to the markets, going to cash, and then not being sure if they should go back, there's a whole pattern that breaks down. Investing can't be done from the gut. In fact, investing from the gut is the best way to destroy wealth. investing from the deliberative, thoughtful, well articulated, mathematically based, logically based, slow thinking brain. That's the key to success. And in this way, investing is somewhat counterintuitive to the natural human decision making process. We don't naturally do well with this because investing does mean paying attention to lots of volatility and being activated regularly. Well, for those of us who are familiar with our neurology, we can become aware, self-aware, as I'm sure you are from time to time. Hey, I'm getting activated. I need to calm down. I need to get the right brain back on. I need to put my blinders on and start taking care of my thinking patterns and get out of this reactive mode. If you've ever made an investment decision because you finally capitulated, because you just got really worried, you know how ill-conceived those decisions are. Well, but you and I are professionals. We're supposed to be able to navigate this stuff. What do you do with someone who's irrationally upset and now you're trying to advise them? Well, there's a problem. So if I've gone all the way into my emotions, if I'm all the way down in these strong feelings that have taken me over, you have to remember about this, what I said about language. That part of the brain doesn't have any language. And so you are talking to this person, trying to use with the only tool you have, the tool of language, communication, rational process, maybe a chart or two to help them understand this. They can't process the information. They're literally hearing inside their brain that same voice that you used to remember from those Charlie Brown television specials. Remember when the teacher would talk to the kids on Charlie Brown and you'd hear something like wah, 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 wah. That's what the other person is hearing. I'm thinking of time with my wife a couple of years ago, several years ago. Actually, we were out trimming a ficus hedge in our house in Naples, Florida. And we were working to kind of keep it nice and clean and fluffy and the dead branches weeded out of it. You have to do this fairly often with these big ficus hedges. And she accidentally, as she was poking around in the tree, ran into a snake. There was a little black snake up there. It was hunting for birds. And she got a hold of him at the very tail end. He didn't like it at all. And it was very distressing for her to have that feeling of the snake in her hand. And so she jumps back away from the hedge. She's terrified of snakes. She can't catch her breath. Her whole body's gone into this state of activation. She can't think. She can't make sense of it. She just starts pointing at the hedge and going, and can't find the words. That's because there are no words in that part of the brain, and her brain was all the way in that emotional reaction. So when I come up running up to her and I go, honey, don't panic. It's just a snake. She couldn't hear a word I was saying. What has to happen when a human being gets into this place is they have to be able to shift mental gears. And so what we want to do here for the last few minutes of this workshop is suggest to you that you can actually help them do that. And there's a very simple way to do that. And the simple way has to do with the following question. If you asked another person, let's say you ask your client who you're working with a question that required them to answer it with a few words, what part of the brain do they have to use to answer that question? Well, the neocortex. So the next time you're in a situation where a client or a number of clients may get emotional because of what they see in the news or what they see in their portfolio or what's happening in their company, whatever it may be, you can assume at this point they're likely to get upset. They're likely to get impulsive. They're likely to have their non-rational brain in charge and their rational brain somewhat shut down. So the worst thing you could do in that circumstance is to walk into their office or get on the phone with them and start trying to talk to them, start trying to advise them. As you're trying to advise them, if they're not using the neocortex, if they're all down here in the primitive brain, the cerebellum and the amygdala, they can't hear a word you're saying. They can't use the information. And this would also explain something you've probably seen many times in your career, where you have a conversation with somebody on Monday and they call you back on Tuesday and you have the exact same conversation on Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday. And they've never taken in any of the information. And the reason for that is you never program their brain to a better quality of decision making. Well, how do you do that? It's really simple. Ask them a question. And the best question you could ask that'll get them to talk if they're upset is something like this. As soon as you realize they're upset, you stop talking, you stop trying to navigate, just ask them this question. Hey, it sounds like you are really chewing on something right now up in your head. What are you feeling right now? What are you thinking about? Tell me what's on your mind. Now, in order to answer that question, what part of the brain does that person have to use? They have to use the neocortex. But what you're going to find is it's going to be a very interesting response. If you'll just be calm and listen and keep asking them to talk, say more about that. Say more about that. Tell me more about that. What you're going to find is the words they use when they first start answering are going to be short. The sentences are going to be clipped. The sentences may not even string together terribly well. But as they talk, the energy in the brain will move from the cerebellum back up to the neocortex. And what will happen is the words will get a little bit longer. This sentence a little bit more well-formed. There will be better syntax, better connectivity. And then they'll start linking sentences together into a narrative. And they'll begin to be able to articulate themselves. Now, it takes a few minutes. And so the question, how are you feeling? What are you thinking about? It looks like you're chewing on something. Tell me what's on your mind right now. You seem a little upset, is the best way to get them to be less upset. Because as they talk, their neocortex comes more online. As you ask them more questions, they have to use more and more of that thinking. They start letting go of the panic and they start moving into a more rational place. For years, before I started consulting and working with Alliance Bernstein, I had a practice in psychotherapy in Northern Virginia. And my practice with every client was exactly the same. They'd walk in the door for their appointment with me. And our whole purpose of working together was for them to get more creativity, get more choices, be able to figure out how to make decisions in life better. Well, of course, every day they'd come from work or from home or wherever it was where some of their problems were causing them pain. And they'd come in pretty emotionally upset. Well, what I say to them the first thing is they sat down, hey, sit down. How's your week? Tell me what's going on this week. How are you feeling? You look a little stressed. And then I'd just be quiet. And the reason I'd be quiet is the more quiet I was, the more they talk. And the more they talk, the more the neocortex goes online. In about 15 minutes, what I have is a very calm, much more rational human being. And now we can get down to work. So step one is to ask the question, how are you feeling? What are you thinking about? Step two of the 4-step process, really simple. Ask them about the future. Ask them to tell you what they think is going to happen. So what do you think is going to happen? Right now we have this election that's pending. What do you think is going to happen? Talk about it. The more you talk about it, rather than getting more upset, what you're going to find is they're going to get more rich in their thinking. What do you think is going to happen with the economy? If they're concerned about the portfolio, what do you think is going to happen with these investments? Where do you think things are going to go? And they'll start doing an analysis, which forces them to use more of their neocortex. And that'll get them even more rational. And then, as a second part of the second step, ask them this question. How do you think that will happen? Why will it go that way? And invite them to go really deep into whatever it is they're thinking about that's gotten them upset. And they'll start questioning their own conclusions. And what you're going to see is the body gets more and more relaxed. They'll sit back more in their chair and they'll become more thoughtful about what they're talking with you about, using bigger words and better concepts. So if you do this for about 10 minutes with anybody who's upset, it'll bring you to the point where you can ask the third question. And the third question is a beautiful question because it's a transition to the point where you can really start helping them. The third question goes like this. Is that what you think is going to happen? Or is that just how it feels right now? Now there's a beautiful little juxtaposition right there. Is that what you think is going to happen? Or is that just how you feel right now? So you're literally teaching them to separate their thinking from their feeling. And by the way, if you do this with clients over and over again, every time they're upset, if you get to the point, this third question, is that what you think is going to happen? Or is that just what it feels like right now? If you get to that place, they'll begin to learn to separate what they're feeling from their thoughts about investing and realize, yeah, there I just went and did it again. I got all upset all again. They'll eventually learn through self-observation how they're distressing themselves in this regard. So the third question is that what you think is going to happen, or is that just how it feels right now? Because they will then say to you, you know what? I don't know how to think about things. It just feels really concerning right now. And you're going to say, and then you're going to do this. It's called normalizing and resourcing the client. Normalizing and resource. You're going to tell them it's perfectly normal to feel this way, and then you're going to give them some resources to think better about it. Normalizing and resourcing looks like this. A lot of people feel the way you do right now. It's perfectly normal. There's times that I can get pretty uptight when I see things happening like that too. But we have found that there's a better way to think about things. And there's some ideas that I could share with you that might help you see things in a little different light. And now you can provide your advice. Now you can provide your insights. Now you can provide the thought leadership that you're accumulating from your great partners. AllianceBernstein, we publish a lot of thought leadership that help you make sense of the markets, but you have other great providers as well. So use those providers to equip yourself to have a great story. Anytime you're in a situation where markets are volatile or the political landscape's volatile or there's other things that are weighing on the minds of clients, having some thought leadership that helps them put a slightly different perspective on things is what you plug into that last step. So let's review here in the last couple of minutes of our seminar what we've got. We've got two parts of the brain. We've got the survival part, fight or flight, the fast-thinking brain that gets impulsive and makes you want to take action. Take action. Got to take action. Then we have the slow-thinking brain, the neocortex. Deliberative, logical, the way you make a decision, crunch the numbers, and make that right investment choice. When it comes to investing, it's always the best course to slow down and do the analysis and run the numbers and make a rational decision, fully engage the neocortex. So in order to help your client understand that that's what they need to do and to actually take advantage of you and your thought leadership, we have this 4-step process. Step 1, how are you feeling? You look like things are concerning you right now. You look a little uptight. Tell me what you're thinking about. How can I help? Thing 2, well, tell me what you think is going to happen in the future. I'm sure you're making some mental scenarios, and then refine that a little bit. Well, how do you think that'll happen? Why do you think it'll go that way in particular? It sounds like you've thought about this a lot. Now they're churning in their neocortex. They're thinking with a clear set of ideas. Their brain is starting to come online. They're starting to slow down their breathing. Their muscle tone is relaxing. Their heart rate is slowing down. They're getting more creative, more resourceful, more logical, more deliberate in their thinking. So then you can say, well, let me ask you, it's been 5 or 10 minutes in the conversation now. Is that what you think is going to happen, or is that just how it feels right now? And they'll look at you and say, you know what, I don't know what to think. And you can say, you know what, that's perfectly normal. We all get activated. We all get tight. The world is a complicated place. There's a lot going on right now. But you know what? We keep a weather eye on what's going on, and there are some ways of thinking about things that are not quite as distressing, not quite as dire. So let me tell you what we think and give you some ideas you can work with. And now you're working with the part of the brain that can understand you, that can use you. And the great advisor, we say at the Advisor Institute all the time, the great advisor is one who knows more than you do and knows more than other advisors, uses that knowledge better on behalf of their clients, and has the courage to advise. And in this case, having the courage to advise means first helping them align their brain so they can use you, and then be able to move forward with that thought leadership. At AllianceBernstein, if we can be helpful to you, if our Advisor Institute materials are of interest, just reach out and let us know. Any AllianceBernstein wholesaler will be happy to help you with that. We have a whole lot of stuff for you. This is just one example of it. And let me say, as we end our time here together today, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for the invitation. Thanks for taking the time to spend with me. And again, if we can be helpful, just ask AllianceBernstein, Advisor Institute, ask for any of our materials, and we'll be happy to provide them to you absolutely free of charge, send you as a digital document. Thanks again. Have a great afternoon.